Let's check out the mic modeler plus preamp. So with most of the insert effects that I've been going over, I've been trying to compare with something that I have in Cubase. And in this particular instance, mic modelers are pretty rare. I actually don't have any plugins. I could try to download a demo of something, but I do have a piece of outboard gear that does microphone modeling. So I'm just going to use that to make these comparisons. With the usual method, I have noise, and the noise helps us, there we go. The noise helps us look at the spectral response of things that we're sending it through. It can also help us, check things like delay. This is nothing new if you've been following this series, but with the noise, I want to demonstrate that with the different microphones, like the different cabinets of guitars, can be thought of as EQ curves. But with microphones, they're more full range than cabinets of a guitar or bass. Bass and guitar cabinets are almost always doing some kind of band limiting, and very often they are ducking the highs to an extreme amount, whereas microphones are meant to have a more balanced response with kind of more subtle spectral differences. So if we look at this flat noise, and then compare that to what it sounds like going through this vocal dynamic microphone, which is supposed to model an SM58, we'll notice a completely different curve. And thus, the best way to think about mic modelers is to think of them as having some kind of interesting EQ curve. What's nice about that is the curves are often more detailed and varied than you can get with using something like the 4-band parametric or the GEC EQs that are in the Kronos. And you can flip through these different flavors of EQ curves very fast, so you can find something that you like, and you'll probably end up going back to the same mic simulators for the same tasks. You have things like, kick dynamic or vocal dynamic. And if you want a list of all of the microphones that these are modeling, you can just maybe take a snapshot of this, or I'll perhaps post this list somewhere else. It's also just right in the manual. So let's compare this vocal dynamic, which is modeling a Shure SM58, which is actually what my voice is going through right now, except I'm also going through an SSL channel strip. So let's check out the noise again through the mic modeler, and then compare the noise through an SM or just a generic handheld dynamic microphone modeled by a Tascam T81VP. So again, looking at the SM58 through the Kronos. Look at the level of detail here as well. Absolutely love that. Bypassing that and then turning on the mic modeler on the outboard gear, and let me choose my destination as a handheld dynamic. So kind of a similar curvature, but definitely it does not have the level of detail. Definitely doesn't have the level of detail that the Kronos does. So let me bypass that. And then I could talk more about the TA1VP, but I really just want to keep this centered on the Kronos. So the position parameter is changing the proximity effect. Now this is going to be very difficult to hear if you're not listening on headphones or on a full range system, because this only affects the low end. So let's continue listening to our noise, and then I'll adjust this position parameter, and you'll hear the low end increase and decrease as I move from close to far. So with the close position, our low end response is as loud as it can be if we're listening to it. And then as I progress higher, the low end will get softer. Hear that? It's pretty apparent. So we have the least amount of low end at far, the most amount of low end at close. This could have almost just been labeled 1 through 4, but there could be other characteristics that I don't know of. For instance, off might have a slight phase shift, a slight phase difference, but given that an complicated EQ curve is changing phase anyway, I'm not exactly sure if this is actually changing the phase of the entire signal on top of what the EQ is doing, but nonetheless. The last thing I guess we can go into is the tube preamp. Now, I have gone over this extensively, but for the sake of comparison with the outboard gear, let's go ahead and do a few chords of sine waves and listen to them processed through a, let's go with FAR SM58 with maximum input. And since I already know that the tube being modeled by the outboard gear gives odd and even harmonics, I'm going to go ahead and put bias at full. So this is the max amount of distortion that these sine waves can possibly go through. Let's listen to that. Oh, and the noise is still on, my bad. And the noise is still on. Hold on one second. Sometimes when I'm clicking through the programs, there's a glitch where the filter frequency stays open. I'll just go ahead and unpatch it. Again, max amount of distortion. That's both odd and even harmonics. Bypassing that, clean. See our nice 3 sine waves through the analyzer. And throwing back our mic modeler on the Tascam, and then going to the tube with maximum distortion. So again, we're modeling essentially the same thing that we're doing in the Kronos, but this is just with a different piece of gear. Very similar response. Let's bypass that. Do it again on the Kronos. The Kronos is a little less bright, but more controlled, and I like it. I definitely like it more than the Tascam in this case. But the Tascam is not bad. It's pretty good. But that concludes this one. I'm not going to do a part 2 on the stereo, since that's the same plugin, just in stereo. You know, just take what you will from this, and hopefully it was educational, and I'll see you whenever.